Hello, I'm Dr. Aizaz from MedicoVisual.com, and in today's visual lecture we will talk about the development of medulla oblongata. Now, before starting the discussion of embryology of medulla oblongata, let me tell you that you must first watch the previous lecture of Rhombencephalon. So here is the lecture that I'm talking about, the 3D Rhombencephalon embryology. That is the lecture that you must first watch to understand this lecture. If you do not watch that lecture, or if you haven't watched that lecture, you will simply not understand this lecture. So please go first watch that. And I have also created the playlist of neuroembryology on YouTube if you are watching on YouTube. And by the way, if you are watching on medicovisual.com, then you do not need to go to the playlist. The videos here are already arranged in the form of playlist. So now let's talk about the embryology of medulla oblongata. So in the last lecture we had discussed that we have these different types of nuclei in the medulla. So what are these nuclei? So medial most is the general somatic efferent nucleus. Then here we have this ventrally displaced. This is the special somatic, not somatic, I'm sorry, special visceral efferent nucleus. Then we have this one, this is general visceral efferent nucleus. And then we have a nucleus which consists of two subnuclei, and these are one is special visceral efferent, and the other one is general visceral efferent. Then we have the general somatic efferent, and finally we have special somatic efferent nucleus. So if you fail to understand the sequence of these nuclei, again please watch the previous lecture and I have discussed these things in detail. Now, what are these nuclei? This is basically the classification, or basically the type of nuclei. So what specific nuclei are present in the medulla oblongata? And by the way, please remember, we have discussed again this thing previously, that these nuclei in this region here, as well as in this region, here is the sulcus limitans, here is also, not here actually, this is the sulcus limitans, this one, and the lateral wall of the central canal. Basically here is we have the cavity of fourth ventricle, but initially it was the central canal, which widened up, its roof plate widened up, its splay opened to form the fourth ventricle, right? So anyhow, this is the sulcus limitans, and it delimits the alar plate derived structures from the basal plate derived structures. So all these structures here, this one and this one, the medially placed, ventromedially placed, these are derived from basal plate. And then dorsolaterally placed, these nuclei here as well, these dorsolaterally placed nuclei, these are derived from alar plate. So basal plate, alar plate. So now let's start discussing one by one. Of course, all these nuclei are bilateral. So now let's start discussing one by one that what specific nuclei are there. So if we talk about general somatic efferent nucleus, so basically from this nucleus, nerve fibers will arise, right? Nerve fibers will arise. And these nerve fibers they will come out of the medulla, right? And then what will happen there, they will supply the voluntary muscles of your tongue. So of course you have your beautiful tongue, and your tongue has some voluntary muscles, so it will supply the voluntary muscles of your tongue. So because it is supplying the voluntary muscles, and those muscles which are derived from somites, so somites derived muscles of your tongue are supplied by this, and that is why it is general somatic efferent. And the nerve which it is forming is the 12th cranial nerve, which is the hypoglossal nerve. So hypoglossal nerve. So with that reference, this nucleus is naturally, it's termed as, it has a very logical name, hypoglossal nucleus. So it's a general somatic efferent type of nucleus which is supplying the fibers to 12th cranial nerve, and it is called hypoglossal nucleus or hypoglossal nucleus. Now if we come a bit ventrolateral, we have this special visceral efferent which I have told you in the previous lecture that it is supplying the muscles that are derived from branchial arch or pharyngeal arch, and with that reference these fibers are also called brachiomotor fibers. So this nucleus, the special visceral efferent type of nucleus, it is a relatively longer nucleus and it is ventrally displaced nucleus. It is ventrally displaced nucleus. Now, interestingly, initially the scientists were not aware of the function of this nucleus. They saw it lying in these sections, but its function was not clear. This is weirdly ventrally displaced, but its function was not clear. So they named it that it's a ambiguous type of nucleus. So they named it nucleus ambiguus. And of course it is a special visceral efferent type of nucleus, and it is supplying the brachiomotor fibers to three types of nerves: ninth cranial nerve, then we have 10th cranial nerve, and we have the cranial component of 11th cranial nerve. So it is supplying the brachiomotor or special visceral efferent fibers to 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerve. So all these nerves, they basically originate from medulla oblongata, 9th, 10th, 11th, and the other one is 12th. So then we talk about the general visceral efferent. Now this general visceral efferent, it mainly supplies the 10th cranial nerve, and along with that some fibers to 9th cranial nerve. So basically it's mainly the nucleus of 10th cranial nerve, which is the vagus nerve, and it is supplying the visceral efferent fibers, I mean the parasympathetic efferent fibers, I mean the autonomic fibers to different viscera of your body. They are supplied with the help of this general visceral efferent type of nucleus, which gives fibers to the 9th cranial nerve as well as 10th cranial nerve, mainly 10th cranial nerve, and some fibers to 9th cranial nerve. So with that reference, 10th cranial nerve is vagus nerve. So with that reference, it is called dorsal nucleus of vagus. Dorsal nucleus of vagus. So again, it is also supplying the mainly 10th cranial nerve, and along with that some fibers will also come from this to 10th cranial nerve as well as 9th cranial nerve and to 11th cranial nerve as well. Please remember that. Now let's talk about general visceral efferent. Now what I mean by general visceral efferent, I think I forgot to mention the details of this thing in the last lecture because that lecture had become pretty huge one. It was too lengthy. You know, you have taste receptors on your tongue and on your pharynx as well, the back part of your pharynx, and in the tonsillar area and so many areas in your mouth you have the taste receptors, but mainly of course they are on your tongue. Now the taste is a type of sensation which is considered a part of the GIT. You know, taste helps to sense the food, so of course it's the part of digestive system, GIT system. With that reference, it is considered a visceral sensation, and of course it's a unique sensation and it's an efferent sensation. It is sensory type, right? So it is special visceral efferent. Again, if you want to learn the details of these classification, I have a complete lecture series on specifically this classification as well, so you can watch that. So taste fibers are supplied to the lots of nerves actually, the 7th cranial nerve, the 9th cranial nerve, and even to somewhat to the 10th cranial nerve, with the help of this special visceral efferent component of this nucleus. Then it also has the general visceral efferent component, which takes the general sensation of distension and stretch and other, even the chemical sensations, chemical milieu of the viscera of your body. It is sensed by again this nucleus. It's subcomponent of this nucleus. Now this nucleus, which loves to taste, is called nucleus of Tractus solitarius. It has got a very fancy and very interesting name. I love this name, I don't know why. So it is called nucleus of Tractus. I love pronouncing this, even though I may be pronouncing it wrong. But anyhow, it's an amazing name. Nucleus of Tractus solitarius, or solitary nucleus. I don't think it's lying solitary. It is along with it has got a company along with other nuclei. But I don't know why it is named as nucleus of Tractus solitarius. But it is what it is. Then we have the general somatic efferent and special somatic efferent. So to explain those things, I am gonna remove this, and of course let's just recap what we have read. So we have hypoglossal nucleus, which is general somatic efferent. Then we have nucleus ambiguus, which supplies the brachiomotor fibers. Then we have general visceral efferent type of nucleus, which is dorsal nucleus of vagus. Then we have nucleus of Tractus solitarius, which covers both type of fibers, the special visceral efferent as well as general visceral efferent. Then we have general somatic efferent and special somatic efferent. So let's remove this, and now let's try to understand it further. So now what actually happens, that if I change the perspective a bit, we actually have this huge nucleus here, this long nucleus. Whoa, it looks like this nucleus is pointing his middle fingers towards me. So what is this nucleus? This nucleus is actually in pons. It is actually in medulla as well, but its major principal component is in pons. So if I roughly draw the complete diagram in a simple way, so this is midbrain, a simplified diagram, and here we have, yes, of course we have midbrain here. Then we have pons. And then we have medulla here. Of course, this is medulla. Right. Now, this nucleus, its major part, this is the principal or major part here. This is the principal part or major part. It is actually the nucleus of trigeminal nerve, and it is lying in the pons. Trigeminal nerve, it originates from the pons. Then along with that principal sensory nucleus, it has got an upward extension or cranial extension, as well as it has also got a downward extension or caudal extension. The upward or cranial extension is going into the midbrain, which is derived from mesencephalon. So it is mesencephalic nucleus of trigeminal nerve. It has got a huge name. Then this downward extension, this caudal extension, it is going into the spinal cord up to C2 or C3 cervical sections. It is even going into spinal cord. So of course, as it goes to the spinal cord, it has to pass through our beloved medulla oblongata. So it is also the part of medulla oblongata. So you see it in the sections of medulla oblongata, but of course its destination is C2 to C3 cervical sections of the spinal cord. So it is spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve. So these three components are basically the components of nucleus of trigeminal nerve. So principal, mesencephalic and spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve. So of course it is the general somatic efferent component. It has its general somatic efferent component, and of course it is carrying the pain and temperature sensation from this region, from the face region, head and neck region, through this nucleus, the spinal nucleus, which is seen in the medullary segment. So let's keep it simple and make it as it was before. Then we have the special somatic efferent. Now we have basically a huge nuclear complex which is forming this. So let's see that. So here we have, now what is this? This is vestibular nucleus complex. So basically it consists of different parts. Let's zoom it a bit, and it consists of different parts. So here we have the superior part, superior nucleus. It's a nuclear complex. So here we have the superior nucleus of vestibular nerve. Then we have, this one is the inferior nucleus of vestibular nerve. Then we have, this is of course the lateral side. So this is lateral nucleus, and this is medial. This is the medial side. This is medial nucleus of vestibular nerve. Then we have the cochlea as well, cochlear nucleus. This is the ventrally placed ventral nucleus, and behind that will be the dorsal nucleus. It is behind as well as slightly caudally placed. Ventral is slightly cranially placed, dorsal is slightly caudally placed. So there are two cochlear nuclei. Of course they are taking the sensation, special sensation, the balance as well as hearing sensation from your ear. It's not complicated to understand, it's of course very logical. So here we have the cochlear nucleus, ventral as well as dorsal cochlear nuclei. Now basically the vestibulocochlear nuclear complex is lying at the junction of pons and medulla. So let's say if I draw a diagram here, that this is midbrain, this is pons, and this is medulla. So this nuclear complex is actually lying at the junction somewhat here, right? So now if you look carefully here, what is happening here is that if we cut a section from here, you see that this is the inferior nucleus. So mainly in that section we might see the inferior nucleus out of this nuclear complex, and sometimes we might see a component of lateral nucleus, but it's hard to find the medial nucleus as well as the superior nucleus in the medulla sections. You will find these nuclei in the pons sections, but not in the medulla section. Of course it is also difficult to find the ventral cochlear nucleus, but you can find the dorsal cochlear nucleus in the medulla section. So in the medulla section you might see the inferior as well as you might see a bit of lateral nucleus, and of course you might see dorsal cochlear nucleus, but not the other nuclei of this vestibulocochlear nuclear complex. So these were the nuclei that you will see in the medulla, and of course along with that there are some other nuclei which are frequently discussed in anatomy, neuroanatomy and neurophysiology, but they are somehow ignored by embryologists, by most of the embryologists. They are ignored by embryologists like you ignore the vegetable dishes if there is a huge pizza served on the table. Of course, who will like to eat the vegetables when you have pizza served on the table? Even I won't like to eat. I love pizza. So I don't know why embryologists ignore the other nuclei, but anyhow, if you want to learn the details of other nuclei, please continue watching this lecture. But if you just want the basic knowledge, I think the lecture up to this point is enough for you. But If you are like me and want to know more, then please continue watching, and we will learn more things of medulla as well, and hopefully these things will help in neuroanatomy as well. So let's continue watching. Then what happens that there is a bit of expansion of this medulla, and we have the formation of this strange thing here. What is this strange thing? We have this complex interconnected web-like network of white matter with intermixed gray matter. So we have nerve fibers. Along with these nerve fibers, we have some random nuclei lying here and there. So it's a complex interconnected network of white matter as well as gray matter. So this network is called reticular network or reticular formation. It is called reticular formation. Reticular formation. Now let me first tell you a bit about its function, and then we will talk about that whether it is derived from alar plate or basal plate, because this is the crux of this lecture, that from what structure which nucleus is derived from what structure. That is very important to understand. Now this reticular formation, it actually spans throughout your brainstem. So here you can see this is the structure of brainstem, which consists of midbrain, pons as well as medulla, and this complex network, it spans throughout the brainstem. You see, it is present in the central part of brainstem like this. Now what is its function? We will not go into details of the functions, but the basic idea is that if I draw the our cerebrum here, which is seat of your consciousness. So what happens there, this reticular formation, it fires impulses intermittently. It intermittently fires impulses towards this cerebrum, and these impulses, what they do is that they wake the cerebrum. So if you are sleeping, reticular formation is turned off and you just go to sleep, because the cerebrum is the seat of consciousness. So continuous nerve impulses, continuous firing, continuous and intermittent firing, continuous but intermittent firing, it keeps your cerebrum, seat of consciousness, awake. That is one function of reticular formation. Along with that, it consists of very important autonomic nervous system centers. For example, center of the respiratory system, the vasomotor center, and even the center that controls the vomiting centers, and chemotrigger zone. You know these things. If you don't know, you will learn it in physiology hopefully. And of course, it has also some functions related with pain modulation. So again, let's not go into details, but the thing is that it is actually firing impulses towards the central nervous system, efferent, right? So it is efferent for the, not central nervous system, of course the central nervous system, but specifically the cerebrum. So it is firing efferent impulses, motor impulses, and trying to wake up the central, I don't know why central nervous system I'm saying again and again. It is trying to wake up the cerebrum, right? So of course it has somehow motor function, efferent function. So with that reference, you can remember that it is mainly, and by the way, please remember, it is the part of autonomic nervous system control. The efferent fibers are going from there. So mainly it is efferent network, and that is why it is derived from basal plate. But please remember that it's a complex network of gray matter and white matter, and some of those gray matter are sensory as well. Some of the gray matter are sensory in function. So that is why most of the reticular formation is derived from basal plate, but some components of reticular formation are derived from alar plate as well. So although it's rare to find the discussion of this reticular formation in embryology, but most of the embryologists whoever wrote about it, they write it that it is derived from basal plate, but some very intelligent embryologists also write that the reticular formation is derived from basal plate as well as alar plate, right? It is derived from both, but mainly basal plate. So that's how that was about the reticular formation. Then now let's move forward and let's talk about another important structure, that we have your cerebrum here, cerebral cortex I mean. So it's not made of glass. I made it a bit translucent, so I will show you what is going on inside it. So this lecture is of course not about the cerebral cortex, don't worry. So what I mean here is that what I want to show here is that some fibers, they originate from the cerebral cortex and they go downward, as you can see. And as they go downward, here what they will do is that they will have to of course pass through the medulla, from the upper part of medulla as well as the downward part of medulla. And of course these fibers, they will be seen in the all parts of brainstem, in the midbrain bones as well as of course medulla, because ultimately they are going to, where they are going to spinal cord, to the ventral horn of spinal cord. They are corticospinal fibers, and in the ventral horn they will synapse with the neurons of ventral horn of spinal cord, and from these neurons nerve fibers will arise and they will supply mainly the skeletal muscles, the somatically derived skeletal muscles, right? So these are corticospinal fibers, right? So these are corticospinal fibers, and as they are passing through medulla, here they are forming a pyramid like structure at the ventral part of medulla. What they are doing, they are not forming the pyramids of Egypt, they are forming the pyramids of medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata have got their own personal pyramids. So these pyramid shapes are basically formed by the downward going corticospinal fibers. So it's an important landmark. The pyramids of medulla, they are important landmark. They are even seen on the ventral, clearly seen on the ventral surface of medulla, forming this swelling. So it is important to understand that how it is formed, and you now know that they are formed by the downward going corticospinal fibers. Then here I have shown another inferior section, a lower section, caudal section of medulla, and the interesting thing that you can note here is that in the caudal section it is the similar to central canal. We do not have this widely open the roof plate of fourth ventricle in the lower section. It is similar to the central canal of your spinal cord. So basically lower section of medulla, especially, it is the transitional zone between the spinal cord and brainstem. It is the transitional zone between the spinal cord and brainstem. That is why medulla as a whole, it is said that medulla is the transitional zone between the spinal cord and brainstem, and this is especially true for the lower part of medulla, because this arrangement is very similar to what you see in the spinal cord. So in the upper section it wide opens like this, it's a place open like this, but in the lower section it is not widely open. It is similar to spinal cord. And here we have the two nuclei. You see, these are these two nuclei, and these nuclei are named as nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus. Nucleus gracilis, and we have the nucleus cuneatus. Now what will happen, that some fibers will originate from these nuclei, from the neurons of these nuclei, axons will come out and they will go upward. Basically, they will first cross. And by the way, I forgot to mention that even these pyramidal fibers, the corticospinal fibers, they also decussate. They also cross like this in the lower part of medulla. Of course, medulla is still here, and at the lower part of medulla, this is the crossing area, decussation area of corticospinal fibers, and this is called major motor decussation. And at the upper section we have major sensory decussation. So after this decussation, you can see closely here, these fibers, of course, they will go upward. And then what is this we have here? These are not testicles in your brain, these are thalamus. These are thalami, and these are there is some interconnected part of thalami, of course. So basically these fibers will go to thalamus, to the ventroposterolateral nucleus of thalamus. Don't worry about these things, you will learn in neuroanatomy if you don't know. So here they will again rally, here they will also synapse with the neurons of this nucleus of thalamus. And then from there some fibers, not some, actually lots of fibers, they will radiate outward in the cerebral cortex like this. This is such a beautiful arrangement of neurons, nerve fibers. Wow, I love this. This is so amazing and beautiful. Neuroanatomy and neurophysiology, neuroembryology, the neurology overall, it's really amazing. It's so fascinating. So yeah, we were talking about the nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus. So now it's important in embryology to understand that from where they are derived, whether they are derived from alar plate or basal plate. To understand this, you must understand their function, and we did not yet talk about their function. So let's talk about that first. Okay, let's hide these things first. So now let's briefly talk about their functions. So here, let me zoom and let me tell you what is going on here. So here we have, this is by the way dorsal part. Now we are seeing from the back side, this is the ventral side. Now actually the fibers related with the proprioception, 2-point tactile discrimination, and vibration, I think vibration as well, and some related sensations, these fibers, they come to dorsal hall of the spinal cord. And then from here what will happen, that they will go upward. They will go upward like this. And then some fibers, they are coming also from the lower limb. This is, let's suppose, from the upper limb. This is from the upper limb. Some fibers are also coming from the lower limb. So those fibers which are coming from the lower limb, they are forming, they are going towards the nucleus gracilis, right? And those which are arising from the upper limb and of course the related area, the chest as well and related area, they are going to nucleus cuneatus. So the upper limb fibers and related area fibers, they form this tract, this white matter tract in the spinal cord, which is called fasciculus cuneatus. And fibers which are coming from the lower limb, these are forming the fasciculus gracilis. So now the point is that it is taking the general sensation, general somatic type of sensation, general somatic efferent type of sensation from the upper and lower limb. So general somatic type of sensations or efferent sensations in general, such type of nuclei, efferent nuclei, generally they are derived from what? Alar plate or basal plate? They are derived from basal plate. So naturally these nuclei, the nucleus cuneatus as well as nucleus gracilis, they are also derived from the alar plate or alar plate. Now you cannot label these nuclei as general somatic efferent type of nuclei. Well, technically they are general somatic efferent, but you cannot label this. The reason is that this term is reserved for the fibers, or for the nuclei or for the neurons that are supplying ultimately to an end organ, ultimately to an effector organ, or ultimately to a sensory receptor. But they are not supplying directly a sensory receptor, or they are not directly supplying a sensory organ. They are within the central nervous system. They are interneurons. These are intermediary neurons. They are not directly supplying anything. So look at it like this, that for example, if you want to classify the tickets at airport, the aeroplane tickets, you can classify the tickets as intrastate flights, for example, interstate flight, or international flight, I mean intercountry flight, international flight. Now the thing is that for reaching one destination from destination A to B, the aeroplane might stop at some intermediary AB area, for example, AB station, I mean the airport, not station, airport. So the plane might first go to this AB, and then from there it might go to B. But when we are classifying, we are looking at the departure and arrival location. So this is, let's suppose, departure location, and this is arrival location. So if for example this both of these are at the same state, in the same state, then we can label it, this is intrastate flight. If they are in the other state, we can label it interstate. If they are two different countries or two different continents, we can label it international or intercontinental type of flight. But if it is stopping by, the aeroplane is stopping by at some intermediary connecting airports, these connecting airports does not change the outcome, and these connecting airports, they are not classified for this situation. So these are like railway stations. These are actually railway stations, and these are actually like the connecting airports. So these connecting airports, they are not generally classified. This classification is reserved mainly for the peripheral nervous system, not for the central nervous system, especially not for the interneurons of central nervous system. Please keep that in your mind. Now finally, I would like to talk about another important nucleus here, and this nucleus is where is this nucleus? Let me see. So here we have this nucleus. So I don't know, to some scientists and to some embryologists, it looks like olive, so they somehow named it as olivary nucleus. But to me, it does not look like olive. So anyhow, it is called olivary nucleus. Basically, it is called inferior olivary nucleus because there is a superior olivary nucleus as well in the pons or midbrain. Yeah, I think in pons. So anyhow, we will learn that as well. But this is inferior olivary nucleus, or it is simply called olive. In the medulla, it is simply called olive. Now, olive has some important functions related with coordination of the movement. Without going into details, let me give you a brief idea that if I draw a simple diagram, a simplified Dr. Najib style diagram of your central nervous system, then we have the cerebellum here. Now in the medulla, somewhat here we have the olive. Now what happens that some fibers, they are coming from the cerebrum, and ultimately they will come to olive, and then from olive they will go to, there is actually the inferior cerebellar peduncle which is connecting somewhat here. We have the inferior cerebellar peduncle which is connecting the medulla with the cerebellum. So anyhow, these fibers will ultimately, they will go to cerebellum. Along with that, it is also taking fibers from the spinal cord, and if I remember correctly, it is also taking fiber from the red nucleus, and basically all these fibers, they are somewhat processed and ultimately they will go to cerebellum. So it is related with coordination of movement. No, because it is related with coordination of movement, you might be tempted to think that it is derived from basal plate, because it is related with motor, with the movement, but it is not derived from basal plate. It is derived from alar plate, similar to the cerebellum, which is also derived from alar plate. I don't know why the cerebellum is derived from alar plate. The and this olive, it is also derived from alar plate. My logical assumption or speculation is that although it is related with movement, but it has to process lots of sensory information. You see, it is getting the balance information from the spinal cord, it is then talking to the cerebral cortex, and related with that it is also talking with cerebellum, related with coordination and related with balance. So all this requires a lots of processing of sensory information. So it is more towards the sensory side as compared to motor side. So it is listening more as compared to giving orders. So that is why it is much more related with processing sensory information. So that is why it is derived from alar plate, not basal plate. It is derived from alar plate. So I think that was all about medulla that you need to know. If you want to be awesome, you can also remember that here is somewhat here we have arcuate nucleus as well. This arcuate nucleus has functions similar to pontine nuclei. Some authorities believe that it is basically inferiorly displaced pontine nuclei, and we will discuss pontine nuclei in next lecture. Pontine nuclei also have functions similar to olive, and they are also derived from alar plate. But basically this is all that you need to understand about the medulla oblongata. Besides these nuclei and these few white matter tracts that I discussed, there are a lot more white matter tracts that are going above or below. I mean up going and down going and laterally going. There are lots of white matter tracts within the medulla, but we will not go into details of those white matter tracts in embryology. In embryology, our focus is the nuclei, the gray matter. About the white matter we will have the discussion when we will talk about neuroanatomy. In neuroanatomy of medulla we will discuss more details of white matter, not in the embryology. So finally, to consolidate all this information in your all of the layers of cerebral cortex, I have created a small game for you. So let's play that game, and then in that game we will classify the nuclei according to their plate of origin. So let's go to that game. So I have created this game on this website wordwall.net, and you can also play this game. I will give the link in description. So let's play that. So here we have these different nuclei. So let's try to place in these boxes, and let's see that whether we are successful in this or not, and try to help me in this. So basal plate, the basal plate most medially, we have hypoglossal nucleus. Then we have nucleus ambiguus. And then we have, if I remember correctly, we have what? We have general visceral efferent nucleus, which is dorsal nucleus of vagus. Then reticular formation, it is mainly derived from basal plate and some components of course from the alar plate, but mainly basal plate, so I will put it here. Then if we talk about alar plate, we have nucleus of tractus solitarius. Then we have spinal nucleus of trigeminal, you remember that. Then we have vestibular nuclear complex and cochlear nuclei, also derived from alar plate. And then nucleus cuneatus and nucleus gracilis, of course they are sensory, so they are also derived from alar plate. Now, olivary nucleus, it is related with coordination and balance. You might first be tempted to classify it here as a basal plate, but this is wrong. Don't make this mistake. Let's classify it in the LR plate, and now let's submit the answers. Wow, I think I'm genius. I have answered all these questions correctly. So you can also play this game and you can enjoy this. And you can also create similar games on this website. It's nice website and it's totally free. There is a paid plan as well, but it's totally free for the basic things. And this video is not sponsored by WordWall. If WordWall is watching, please sponsor me. I love your website, but they haven't given me any money to promote their website. I just love it, so that's why I promoted it. So that was all about the embryology of medulla. Thank you so much for watching this video.